us to perhaps, I don't know, engage more, not so just philosophically, but also very practically. I mean, like I would have said, what is the responsibility of intellectuals to society with regard to technological developments that limit freedom, including academic freedom, constrain democracy, affect the environment, and threaten the people's health and livelihoods? I think this puts it in a much more direct way. Because also I wanted to think that when we talk about technology or technological, now we have a technological age. Well, the age I'm not so sure about, but I want to engage with the technology. Technology has also two sides. It's not a neutral thing. It's for or against, or sometimes, well, it can be for everybody, but it need not be for everybody. I think, for instance, that what, in the context of what we've been doing, discussing all around, we are talking really about, all the constraints to academic freedom, democracy, and sustainable development. All those things that impede the realization of those things that we all want. So for me, therefore, the question is, how do we intellectuals behave, act in the light of these developments, which are either pro-people or anti-people? And just to give you something to think about, if we can elaborate on it a bit later, I was just reading a review of a book, and somebody was saying, actually, the question is, do we have the right to have rights? In other words, the right to have rights is particularly now is extremely important. Because, for instance, a lot is happening that you don't know about you. Somebody is trailing you, knows what you have looked at on the internet, the communication you have had with XYZ, the content of that discussion. You don't know, but you have the right to know. And if you don't have that right, or you are not even aware, you don't have the right even to have the rights. So, but this is not my job to start making a big speech, because I'm supposed to be the chairperson. You see what I mean? But these crazy chairpersons can take time from the speakers. So to answer VP, do we do it the way it is in the yeah? So we do that. Okay. Chambi, karibu.
So I will start with reading some very short passages, and then we'll move from there. In the context of academic freedom, there are three important intellectual social responsibilities in a technological society. And the first one is promoting ethical and inclusive technology. In this sense, intellectuals have a duty to advocate for and contribute to the development of technology that adhere to ethical standards. This includes addressing issues like privacy, data security, and ethical use of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and biotechnology. Second, digital literacy and education. In this case, the responsibility includes intellectual bearing the responsibility of promoting digital literacy and education, helping individuals navigate the digital landscape, critically assess information, and understand the implication of technology. And then the third one is defending digital rights and freedom of expression, which in this case, intellectuals should actively advocate for and protect digital rights, including freedom of expression, privacy, and access to information. They should oppose any attempts to censor or restrict this rise in the digital sphere. End of the reading. To the next section. How many people know something called ChatGPT? Or OpenAI, Open Artificial Intelligence. So what I was reading, do you think I'm the one who wrote it, or is a robot or a machine that wrote it? So from the get-go, you knew it was not my voice. Mm-hmm. So this is a demonstration of where we are in the so-called fourth industrial revolution, whereby, in a way, robots, I'm using robots as an easy way to explain artificial intelligence for laymen and laywomen like me, but generally what they really mean is you have a machine and you feed it, you basically teach it like the way you are teaching a human being. But because it's a machine, you have the capacity of feeding it a lot of information, especially the information that is available in the internet, on Google, digital information. And then it starts mimicking human beings in terms of starting to do the kind of things that human beings do. So in this sense, ChatGPT OpenAI can actually solve mathematical equations, it can write programs, and it can prepare presentations and lectures and so forth. And the more you feed it deep contextual information, the more it produces something that is more closer to the human being. Actually, I'm told if, for instance, it knows how Professor Shivji writes, and it has access to Professor Shivji's books, then I can tell ChatGPT, please, can you write an essay about academic freedom like the way Issa Shivji writes? And then it goes and writes it. So for me, I'm seeing it as a very significant challenge in the context of academic freedom and the social responsibility of intellectuals, partly because when I go back to the Dar es Salaam Declaration, which if you have read in the very beginning, the coordinator, my late father, Seti Chachage, when you read like the preface and the preamble, you see a lot of the imprint of the kind of his style of writing at that time. And you'll notice that one of the core issue that the people who drafted it were concerned with is the issue of education. And even if you compare, and I know our keynote speaker yesterday did a very good job on that, when you compare the two documents, the Kampala one and the Dar es Salaam one, of course the Dar es Salaam came earlier on, and then the Kampala came later, you will see there's a lot of similarity, but there is more emphasis on education. Provision of education, access to education, not just to academic or intellectual, but to the whole society. And one of the concerns is how do you make this education accessible to basically every human being, or in the context of Tanzania, every Tanzanian. And in the context now of the fourth industrial revolution with all these technologies, it kind of become very tempting to feel, well, now it's easy to address some of these things that we couldn't address. We can simply use technology to solve our problems of literacy, and there's some programs that are already being initiated here in Tanzania. Pilot studies have been done, where children are given small gadgets which are fed with information about arithmetic, mathematics, English, Kiswahili, and within a year or so, they master some of these things that they couldn't master in the normal schools, either because they don't have enough teachers or they don't have enough books and so forth. But the other side of the coin is that there are some situations where, and I'm borrowing a word, the phrase from one of the technological savvy Kenyan neighbors of ours, where she said we can't really, like, she was using it in the context of entrepreneurship. We can't entrepreneurship or entrepreneur ourselves out of poverty. So, in a sense, there are moments when you realize you can't really technologize yourself out of some of the very fundamental structural crises that we've been having as a society. So as tempting as it is, these gadgets, this ChatGPT, the robots, etc., they are coming to be laid on top of structures of inequality that are already there. So if you have, for instance, structure of labor inequality, and then you bring your cell phones to try to solve the problems. But if you really look at the cell phone as a commodity and look at the way it had been developed, you will see that it's closely tied to what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the same children who are supposed to have this rights to education that these declarations are talking about are used in terms of child labor to produce, to mine coltan and other commodities for the phone. So it's very easy to see it as something that is discharged from the ground, from the labor that people are doing it, because it has all these promises of solving this literacy and other problems. And for me, that's a core concern. That if you look at Article 50 of the Dar es Salaam Declaration on Academic Freedom, it says all members of the academic community have a duty to contribute towards redressing historical and contemporary inequalities in our society based on differences of class, belief, gender, race, nationality, region, and economic condition. Toward this end, all members of academic communities should voluntarily give their time to impact education to disadvantaged sectors of the population. So as someone who believes a lot in technology, I believe there's a lot of promise in redressing it because we can use it in that sense that I've talked about, to teach children, to provide constructive information. But we have to be very careful because this same technology are overlaid within the same structures of inequality that we're trying to address. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. 12 minutes. Is it a good afternoon already? It's afternoon. Okay. I have 12 minutes. My name's Baruani Mshale. I pronounce it slowly because so many people usually mispronounce my name. I am from a non-government organization called Twaweza East Africa. We work in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And our work aims at improving the social contract between citizens and their governments through research and public engagement. Now, on to the topic of discussion here. I think this is a very good sequence in that Chambi has talked about the structures of inequality, and I want to talk a little bit more on the psychology of individuals and the collectives, and not so much on the structures and the spaces, but the psychology of the people when it comes to issues of academic freedom, democracy in this age of technology, however we phrase it. And to begin with, and I'll spend like 3-4 minutes talking about this, the first argument that I'm making is that intellectual social responsibility is needed now, and it will be even needed more in the context that we are in. And some people call it the VUCA context or the VUCA world, and I will explain what that means. So the first statement that I'm making is that the confluence of multiple crises that Mzee Goya was already starting to mention them makes it an imperative for us as intellectuals to fulfill our social responsibility. What do I mean by this confluence of multiple crises? Some of them already were mentioned, and I'll repeat even those that Mzee Goya mentioned. and there are about 7 of them. One, there is democratic backsliding around the world, and in Africa it's very evident. That is, the principles of democracy are eroding, the rise of authoritarian regimes is increasing, and the populism is on the rise as well. 2, there is economic stagnation, globalization, and volatility of the economy. National economies are increasingly globalized, and there is a lot of volatility. And if that, at the same time, we have seen economic stagnation in different parts of the world. So that is the second crisis. The third crisis is rapid population growth. And this is more important in Africa, where I think some of you might have seen some data, some statistics that were released recently that shows that the future is Africa. In the 1950s, the African population accounted for about 8% of the global population, but I think by 2030s or 40s, I don't remember exactly, it will be accounting for about a third of the global population. If we look at our specific countries, Tanzania, for instance, estimations show that by 2050, our population will be about 129 million people, I think, and Dar es Salaam will be a mega city by 2035 with close to 14 million people. And that rapid population growth implies the younger generation will be the majority. In Tanzania, that is already the case, where 77% of the population is below the age of 35. So this is another crisis that we need to pay attention to. The number 4 crisis is the social fragmentation and inequality that is more prominent around the world right now. Number 5 is technological advancement, of which we are going to be focusing on. There has been rapid technological advancement, some of which Chambi has mentioned. The number 6 crisis are the health and pandemics, including the mental health pandemic that is on the rise. And some recent statistics, for instance, show that teenage girls lead in terms of the number of people who commit suicide around the world. And these are global statistics. And the last one that I will mention, the number 7 crisis, is the environmental and the climatic change crisis or catastrophes. So the confluence of all these multiple crises create what others are calling the VUCA world. The VUCA, V standing for volatile, U for uncertain, C for complex, and A for ambiguous. That we are in a context that is volatile, complex, uncertain, and ambiguous. Our frameworks that we used before to understand the world, if it's the political system or the economic system, are being challenged by the interaction of all these multiple crises. So in this VUCA world, with all these multiple crises, our intellectual social responsibility is even more important because we need your big brains as intellectuals to help us navigate that changing and challenging and uncertain context. Now, my submissions to narrow now the discussion to talk about technology, and I will avoid repeating what Chambi has said. What I am posing as a question is, and I'll make my submissions as well, is that these technological advancements and the opportunities or the constraints that they avail for fighting for academic freedom and democracy, do we see it as a promise, or are we already seeing it as an illusion? In Tanzania, we have the Tanzania Communications Regulatory Authority. The moment you mention TCRA in Tanzania, already people are thinking about the restrictions that it tends to impose. And I just saw in the news this morning that the president has dissolved the TCRA board. What does that mean? Are we going to have a board that will create an enabling technological regulatory framework? Or are the authorities not happy with the restrictions that have been imposed so far, that they want a board that is going to make sure that there is even more enforcement and they restrict our communications freedoms? I don't know. I just thought maybe I should start by saying that. Then there is the promise of technology. some of which Chambi has mentioned. When we talk about our basic rights and freedoms, such as freedom of accessing information, we know that with online technologies, digital spaces, there's a lot of information that we can access more readily. If it's information about the government, if it's information about our universities, about people in different parts of the world. So we can easily access that information using our smartphones. We can associate, we can assemble all these different forms of online digital platforms for deliberation are there, and we can take advantage of those. And if we want to mobilize and organize in fight for and defending our academic freedom, that means I don't have to travel to Nairobi. I can easily convene with my colleagues in Nairobi, and we can strategize collectively and exchange experiences and ideas. We can express ourselves, and we can share our opinion online and otherwise, even with the state as well. And we can offer each other solidarity. We have seen petitions, online petitions, for instance, empathy and collaboration. So there is the promise. It can make it more expedient in drafting, say, a declaration, for instance. We can draft a declaration and then we can use the ChatGPT to improve it. So there is that promise. But then there is also the illusion of technology. Joe mentioned yesterday about the algorithm. So much as there could be opportunities, but also there is the illusion of technology. There is the algorithms that are created by a few people, and they dictate what we see when we are using these technologies, how we see it, and when we see it. And it influences our behaviors, because when we're exposed to certain information, then that will influence our behavior, our real-life behaviors. If it's about voting, the algorithm may only expose you to certain information about certain parties or candidates, and as a result, you remain uninformed, so you remain ignorant about other perspectives, and then you end up voting a certain way, believing that you have been accessing information online, and you are very informed, and you are making an informed choice, but actually you are not, because of the algorithm that dictates what you can see, what you can read, and what you can hear. Technologies have also implied increased surveillance by the state. And I don't think I need to belabor much on that. I think it's very vivid. We are self-censoring ourselves so much, knowing that we have the so-called digital footprint, and it can be used against us at any time. How am I doing in terms of time? About 3 minutes, thank you. But at the same time, as Chambi was explaining about ChatGPT, it gives you back what you have fed it. So technology and all these spaces are not bias-free. They are not value neutral. We take our biases into these technologies, so we need to be mindful of that. And at the same time, we need to be mindful of other limitations that prevent us from taking advantage of all these technological advancements in fighting for our basic rights and freedoms. There are restrictive laws in all our countries. We are familiar with them. In Tanzania, for instance, we have the Online Contents Act, and actions have been taken against some people using this act. But also there are some structural and financial limitations when it comes to taking advantage of emerging technologies. The technologies are not necessarily cheap. One has to own a gadget that they can use, and not everyone can do so. And even when you have it, you still need to buy the data bundle. In Tanzania, if you compare to Kenya and Uganda, for instance, it's slightly cheaper, but it's also not very cheap. And in some other countries in Africa, it's still also expensive. And there are questions of coverage as well. So when we are talking about issues of democracy, fighting for academic freedom, and we want to make sure that we are not leaving anyone behind, we should be mindful that these technologies have limitations in terms of who can participate. And to conclude, I just want to reiterate that we should not blame the technologies, but rather the problem is with us. There is a problem with our psychology. We have a culture of silence and submission. We have a culture of violence and brutality to ourselves and to others, and we are taking these and we are performing them in these online and digital spaces. We are not inclusive. People were talking about how we are divided even in the academic groupings. our own colleagues can then use the information that we post on social media, and it can be used against us. So how do we then, we need to ask ourselves the question about how do we produce and reproduce this culture of silence and submission, which gets in the way of us fighting for academic freedom in the age of technology. And finally, we need to forge, I think as a way forward, we need to forge collaboration beyond the academia, because listening from all the submissions from the academic staff and even from the Students' Union, I did not hear much about whether you collaborate with the likes of us in the CSO field to fight for your academic freedom, which we need, the society needs. Zito mentioned the collaboration that was there with the TGNP and others back in the days. But nowadays, where is that? Do we have these meaningful collaborations with the CSOs in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, and elsewhere? Or we have been divided so much? So my plea as a way forward is that we really need your intellectual contribution, and there is a promise, yes, but don't feel overwhelmed. We are out there and we can forge this collaboration and we can work together. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I suppose it's already afternoon. Good afternoon. Are we sleeping in any way? Thank you. So I'm coming from the popular movement, if I can say so. And before I proceed, allow me to thank the organizers for the initiatives to bring such kind of a diversity in terms of the participation, to get to hear from what is happening on the ground, not just from the academic institutions and the related. And departing from there, allow me to start with a small scenario as an example of what I'm going to proceed. So this morning I was brought in the campus using the boda boda, the motorcycle, right? And I was left somewhere near the NBC Bank. For those familiar with the campus will know where it is. And I tried to question as to why did the motorcyclist had to leave me a bit far from the premises. And I was told, of course, the fact which I knew already, but just to get more experience from him, that the motorcyclists are in a way banned from accessing the university premises. And even now that they've been allowed after a very long struggle, they are still banned to access some other area of the university. And one of the arguments advanced was they are criminals, they are thieves, and the related. And this border driver asked me, I will use Swahili. Lakini dada fikiria, kama mimi ni mwizi, kwa nini saa 3 usiku na kuendelea, hakuna mtu anayenizuia kwenda zaidi ya hapa? Like trying to question, is the question really that they are criminals, that's why they were banned? Because during the night from 9, they can usually take their clients even beyond the spaces that are in a way restricted. So according to him, those are some of the political decisions made, but which don't take into consideration the interests of the wider community, and the Boda people being one of the groups. And he thinks the reason why that had to happen, it's because the Dala business is owned by the professors. These are not my words. Owned by the professors. And they're trying in a way to limit the competition between the Boda and their Dala business and so forth. I don't know how much this is authentic, but that's what he thought. So I'll call us upon to reflect on the Article 22 of the Kampala Declaration, which actually calls the intellectual community has the responsibility to struggle for and participate in the struggle of the popular forces for their rights and emancipation. And this is the intellectual community that is actually not even trying to understand the struggles of the community around, but closing them outside their premises. And here we are speaking of the digital era, and I'm glad that Michele actually ate on one of my of my point, the inequality in terms of how people can access information and the related within this digital era. And these are the people who comes from the community, from the poor masses, who have been in so many ways excluded from the information, the technological information that can be accessed because of poverty, right? Most of them don't own the smartphones, speaking of the bandwidth which he spoke of, and so on and so forth. And expecting that maybe some of the conversations between them and the intellectual community could actually happen when they meet, but again, they are closed outside the fence of these very premises that we expect them to be for the interest of the people. So it's really alarming the way there has been an increasing gap between the universities, or rather the academic community, and the community out there. Very few academicians understand what is happening with the struggles of the people out there, like what the boda people have been struggling with, what the street vendors have been struggling with, and you know, what the women, pet traders women have been struggling with around the questions of exploitative loans and the related. But then how can this information being shared with this academic community while there is no way these two groups can meet, not online, not even physically? So it makes it very hard for the academic community to fulfill their responsibility under Article 22. How do you participate in the struggles that you don't know about? How do you advance them while you even don't want to know about what is happening out there? If I may ask the professors and you know the intellectual community here, what was was there any initiative that was done by the university as an institution during the evictions of the street vendors? I mean, taking into account that this is one of the groups of the working masses out there trying to struggle to survive, there will be none. I'm sure there will be none. If there was any contribution, actually, was to continue the advancement of the state's propaganda that these people must be evicted because they are blocking the way downtown. You know, they are destroying the environment, and all sorts of propaganda that, in most cases, are being used by the states whenever they want to victimize and oppress the poor people. So where is our position in that as the intellectual community as far as supporting the struggles of the masses are concerned? And it's very interesting also sometimes how, as far as the technology is concerned, how most of us from the academic community would rely in the information shared on the social medias and take it as if that is what is really happening on ground, without necessarily knowing what is actually happening on ground with the masses, because we're not there and we really don't want to be there. And speaking of struggles of the masses, yesterday the president of MOHAS was here. I'm not sure whether he's here today. His presentation was so good, by the way. But I also wanted to question the position, or rather, the contribution of MUHAS at the university within the National Hospital in an era where health services have been commodified. Lots of people can't access health services. A good number of people at Muhimbili itself and other hospitals survive on charity. Like there are lots of charity campaigns in social media these days to contribute for the health services for the majority of poor people who have failed to cater for such services. As one of the social responsibilities of the intellectuals of the academic community, what has MUHAS and the MUHAS community been doing as far as they advance their own struggles as the intellectuals and the doctors? How have they tried to relate and connect that to the struggles of the people who can't access health services? Because these are day-to-day people's struggles, and if we need to be relevant to the people, as we said yesterday, we must see how we connect our own struggles with the concrete needs of these people. Like these days, you can become a celebrity by starting a charity campaign in the social media to donate for people who have failed to pay their bills. How do we think, why can't we think the opposite of it? Instead of such charity campaigns, as the intellectual, as the academic communities, why don't we think of driving the agenda for free health services for everyone? Because in that way, we'll be speaking to the concrete realities of the people and become relevant, as we said. And speaking of relevance, this morning it was mentioned, even yesterday, the question of our research. For me, there are three things. One is our research really in line with the concrete issues of the people. So that is one. But again, even if they are the reports taking into consideration the realities of the poor masses? Because that one could also be another dimension. Suppose we have a group of researchers taken to Mbarali in the ongoing evictions there. Of course, they might interview the people in the usual way of extracting information from the poor people sometimes without even being accountable to them. Sorry. I'm told I only have 1 minute. Let me conclude, and I was not done. So, but they come with a report that is so much pro-investor in a manner that disregard the victimization and the ongoing struggles of the real people who have been evicted there. So that is in terms of the report. But the last thing with regard to the research, even if the report speaks of the struggles of the people, can it be accessible to these very people? The language is foreign. Sometimes it's being published in some spaces where they can't even access. So even if it speaks to their own struggles in a manner that they could learn anything to advance their struggles, but then it's still not accessible to them. 1 minute, Mr. Chair, if you will allow me, just to finish. Few recommendations I had. One of them was already spoken by Mshale. Finding programs that will bring together the academic community and the social movements. And he mentioned about civil societies, but sometimes we forget the popular movement and in a way concentrate with NGOs and other civil society movements. I think that one has to be taken into account. And even when we make these synergies, it's very important also to remember not to patronize these popular movements, because sometimes we come with our academic tendencies of, teaching and like the usual stuff that disempower the people. And in terms of addressing the concrete realities, let me make this one point. I think it's very important also, learned as we are, to honor and advance our indigenous knowledge. This is very important, and of course I'm saying this before the intellectual community at the risk of seeming ridiculous, because our education is so much westernized, so much that some of our own indigenous knowledge is considered backward. But for me, I think it's very important to honor, promote, and advance it, because It caters for three things, I think. First, it's what is relevant to our people. It's what is readily available to the people. And if we are to advance it, that means we'll also become more relevant to them. But secondly, I think our own knowledge also, to the large extent, embodies the values that are non-Western values, sharing seeds, sharing herbs, and the related, as opposed to the marketization of everything. So it's very important. And lastly, I think as far as the academic freedom is concerned, it also gives us freedom away from the global domination which Professor Joe mentioned yesterday when it comes to the research. There's a monopoly of research. Finished. Thank you. Maybe I'll continue later.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to introduce myself. I got invited to this meeting under the umbrella of ASAPOCT, Academic Staff Association of Public Universities and Colleges, where I serve as the president to organize all universities on matters of common interest. So my name is Julius. I'll be speaking about intellectual social responsibility. So who are these intellectuals? I think this question has been answered. We are all intellectuals and acting in different angles. But to qualify about the topic that I'll be discussing, I'm going to refer to the family, because when we speak of intellectual social responsibility, we are actually referring to the impacts of decisions. So we make decisions at various walks of life. So a university, a higher learning institution, like a family, always make decisions. At the family level, we need to be concerned about the impact of the decisions that we make, because that's the lowest level of organization, and it's very important. Reflecting the kind of decision that we make at the family and at a higher learning institutions, and that is the society of intellectuals, we need to be concerned about the outcome of all the kinds of decisions and activities that we do, because whatever is decided at the university, whatever is decided at a higher learning organization has an implication on what happens to the society. And it is recommended that our processes need to be transparent and ethical. So, when we talk of intellectual social responsibility, we are actually referring to the moral duty of a higher learning institution to support democratic values, ethical behavior, respect for environment, and active citizenship. We know we have been charged with the duty, for example, of teaching, research, and consultants. And that is according to the mandate of the law and the policies that we are operating within. From the angle of intellectual social responsibility, we need to do more than that. We need to reflect on the society. So, talking of the intellectual social responsibility, there are key principles. And one of them is human right. So whoever looks at the intellectual social responsibility should also consider it at a human right angle. Talking of the transfer of knowledge, we have the mandate to transfer knowledge to individuals and organizations outside of the higher education through health services. The type of service that we give has to be equitable. We know there are those who will have access and those who will not have access. We have the mamalishe, babalishe, etc., etc. We should not deny these people an opportunity to access the beauty at the university. So again, that means we need to design and tailor courses that the community can easily access despite their difficulties in terms of financial constraints. So how do we achieve all this? There are several matters. We have been told and we have been hearing on the need of stakeholders' engagement. It is the duty of the university to revisit on its various policies, on the list of stakeholders. If your focus, depending on your mission, is higher ranking, you want to be number one in Africa, for sure you are going to achieve advancement in science. But there are chances that the focus for the common people, the mwananchi, will be low. So there should be a strike of the balance. You need to also appreciate about the function of leadership and the way you communicate that vision. Readers, despite the competing interests and the limited resources that we have, it is important to share the vision, to recognize that intellectual social responsibility is an important element to whatever that we are doing. There's also the need, for example, to consider the people you are working with. If you have a staff that is not motivated, there's very little that we can leap from the from social responsibility. So we'll do less. So we need to have good incentives. Why do I go save the community? What are the motivations for that? What if I publish a paper from the recruitment point of view and the promotion point of view? So there should be a strike of the balance between these competing interests. But more importantly, as I close, as finalizing, intellectual social responsibility is a moral responsibility of individuals and of the institutions. Thank you very much. And we need to embrace the human rights that they are.
Speaking of academic freedom, I am being threatened by the power that be even before I start. I may need to appeal to my fellow citizens to stand up and guard my right to speak and speak fully. But on a serious note, it's always difficult to be the last person to speak because, as was mentioned yesterday, you sound like you're plagiarizing everybody else. So either you say they have said it or you try to figure a way around it so that you're bringing the thoughts together. And I was really pleased, and I want to thank the chair, when he gave us another way of thinking about the panel. He said, what is the responsibility of intellectuals to society with regard to technological developments that limit freedom, constrain democracy, and affect people's lives and livelihoods, something like that. And I think that's where I wanted my thoughts to go. And I'm very pleased that listening through the last 3 days, I feel that that's where we are going. So I'm going to start with something that I learned from the E.S. Godwin Murunga. See, I'm a good academic, which is to start with what you wanted to say at the end, so that if you get cut off by powers that be, your thoughts are in the room. I think I want to actually leave us with these 3 thoughts. First of all, how does the practice of intellectual freedom progressively advance the transformation of society to deliver the vision of the world, the people of those societies, the societies we belong to, aspire to? That's a broader question. And then with regard to this panel, the questions for me are we as intellectuals using technology effectively to connect with individuals working in other spaces, so that the spaces in which we work in, whether they're academic, policy, political, or artistic, when those spaces become abusive, oppressive, or restrictive, all of us join together to defend their rights as much as we hope they will defend our rights. And I'm really pleased that this panel and the panel before has illustrated the diverse range of spaces that intellectuals work in. And the third question, are we as intellectuals using technology effectively in such a way that we are guaranteeing that when our freedoms are abused, the whole society comes up to defend us? I want to make the point just briefly that culture evolves. I think we must go back to that question of what culture is, not just because I'm a cultural worker, but I'm a little bit concerned that so many of the presentations have talked about culture as a threat. And I just want to highlight 2 things that were said. I think, Issa, you talked about culture as a terrain of struggle. I think Joe also talked about the work that we do to continue to advance, to, if you want, develop our culture, to bring our culture to meet the needs of the people that we are saying we are representing. For me, I like to think of culture in this way. People say, on our journey, we have discovered, tested, tried several things. We are distilling them into best practice. We've distilled them into best practices, and this is what we have. But because we continue to live and learn, to explore, to test, and continue to revise what we had agreed in the past were best practices, and to evolve, we must continue going back to these questions. So rather than fighting culture, I invite every one of you to begin to identify as a cultural worker. People mobilizing, and I want to go back to people like Cabral, who understood culture not as a problem to be eradicated or grappled with, but an asset to the work that we do of liberation. Fanon talked about culture as the whole body of efforts made by a people in the sphere of thought to describe, justify, and praise the action through which that people has created itself and keeps itself in existence. I think for the last 3 days, we have been reflecting on the body of efforts made by academics in the sphere of thought to think about what academic freedom is and what it means, to think about intellectual freedom and the social responsibility that it brings. So I also want to quote Fanon, and I appreciate and empathize with everybody who has stood up and talked about the struggles we are facing, because we must begin there. But then Fanon tells us that we must rid ourselves, now that we're in the thick of the fight, of minimizing the actions of our, and I'm going to add, mothers and fathers, and of feigning incomprehension when considering their silence and passivity. They fought as well as they could with the arms they possessed then. And if the echoes of their struggle has not resounded in the international arena, we must realize that the reason for their silence lies less in the lack of heroism than in the fundamentally different international situation of our time. I want to suggest that when we talk about the fundamentally different international situation, one of the things we're talking about is the technology, and the way that the technology allows us to do now, but also challenges us in ways that the technology people in the past did not have. For me, technology is a tool. It is the tool of technology that we have to grapple with. I went and got my phone because I realized I talk too much. I'm a storyteller. I put in too many stories. So I need to use the technology because I will be grappling with more technology here. I am at 6 minutes. I also think we need to think about it like this. See, you always have to take control of the technology. You must also think about the fact that technology always changes. We're always in an era of technological change. Let me say, like Ndugu Kamata, I remember when radio first hit the place, our societies. When television came, okay, I was not alive then, but I remember. When television came, when print media came, and people said, we are in an era of technological change, it's impossible to work. And they found ways of working. Some of us were born in the era we call BC, before computers. We have learned to work with computers. And I think that rather than be afraid of technology, we must do what the rest of the panel has done. Identify the challenges, think them through, and what I was going to do was to look at some of the pros and cons. I think that's been well done. I'm going to skip all of that. But I do want to throw in the story that Bayo always tells that I think about when I'm at this campus, of how they would get one copy of Cheche. Those days, hapo zamani za kale, it would go to the University of Zaria, and they would use cyclostyling. They would actually write and use cyclostyling to reproduce it. I looked up cyclostyling, and for those of you who thought it was a proper technology, the dictionary defines it as an early device for duplicating handwriting. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Some of you, that is how you became academics, right? And they used that in those days. Today, on WhatsApp, I can take something that has been said in this room and send it. People are watching us on live stream. People who are all over the world. That's the gift of technology. It's got pros and cons, as we've been told: greater surveillance, built-in prejudices and biases, availability of too much material, some people can't deal with that, competing perspectives, and so on. Let me finish by taking us to something that, and I think all our keynotes did such an amazing job, talking about the dignity of human beings talking about the need to take back our sovereignty, with finishing with something I've really been thinking about. I've been really reflecting on Michere Githai Mugo's work since she passed away. By the way, she was the first female chair of our scientific committee at Codestria. And there's a book of hers where she talks about orature as human rights, where she talks about the onion structure theory. And I'm really interested in the way she positions the orature artist or the intellectual in relation to the societies that they serve. She says this, that the work of the orature artist is to speak truth to power. And power, by the way, is not only leadership. Power is even the society. I think Joe illustrated for us yesterday, talking about the challenge of sex, gender, and sexuality, that sometimes the power that we are facing is the power in the society. I was being reminded, I think Valence was talking about it, of how a governor in Nairobi, a governor in Kenya, who was before the Senate for being impeached. Yesterday, they played tapes at her impeachment of fellow male politicians saying very derogatory things about her and saying she must learn to respect us as men. And I say that because we had talked about the lack of my gender in this space. So we must also say that power is sometimes the society that we live in. Mugo challenges us to think about how we academics take the front line in challenging accepting norms to fulfill our responsibility to society, which is to sustain the culture that we come out of, to make it constantly evolve, because when culture does not evolve, culture dies. Her argument is that the intellectual, the orature artist, is able to do what they do because the society so values their contribution that even when they do not immediately agree with what they said, if power comes up against them, society rises to defend them. We had that example where Ali Mazrui would debate even Idi Amin himself, right? And you ask, what gives people like that the courage? We've had so many examples from so many of you where you have risen up and spoken out at great cost to yourself. Why? The only way we can defend our academic freedom is to make sure that we take the particular privilege we have as academics. And the privilege is that we have a dedicated space and dedicated time to do the work in the realm of thought that Cabral calls us to. Those privileges are not given to us because we are special in any way. They're just given to us because we have been given a responsibility by society. So when you get the right to read and all that pertains to your degree, or when you aspire and you work towards that right, you do it not to get a better job or greater, whatever it is you want. You do it to earn the privilege to carry the responsibility. So let me go do as what Mwalimu Shivji did. I want not to pass, you guys, I won't give you recommendations because that would be passing the buck and saying we have done our job. I want to throw the ball back to you. 1, how does the practice of intellectual freedom progressively advance the transformation of society to deliver the vision of the world the people of the societies we belong to aspire? 2, are we using technology effectively to connect with individuals working in other spaces so that when the spaces we work with become abusive, oppressive, or restrictive, all the intellectuals, regardless of which spaces they work in, rise up in our defense across the continent, across our countries, across the world, because we all understand our freedoms are interconnected? And 3, are we as intellectuals using technology, embracing it effectively in such a way that we retain control of it and guarantee that when our freedoms are abused, it is the society that will defend us? Thank you.
According to the program, we should have finished this session several minutes ago. And I'm quite confused now. What do we do? Can I give some guidance? Shall we? Because if you guys want us to go until 3:30 in the afternoon, that's fine. We've got enough time. But if you want to, and we just had something to eat, so no problem. So let us just simply go. Huh? How is that? First of all, I'll thank the members of the panel, and you agree they're all very brilliant. So, but I think just before we go on, I think just a bit of 30 minutes. That's fine. Thank you. You know, we haven't really said. We're just taking all intellectuals as all intellectuals. But you know, they're intellectuals for the people, and the intellectuals also against the people. And I think this is something we should also bear in mind. Because when Shale made the point of this conference of conference Yanini, this multiple crisis thing. And then he talked also about collaboration. And I began thinking, who do you collaborate with? How do you identify one to collaborate with? But I think this leads to one thing that I think is missing. You know, we no longer talk. We no longer discuss. We no longer debate. Consequently, we no longer know whose ideas and whose practice reflects the kind of intellectual that I would like to be or society expects. Because if we just take a generic thing, intellectual, we really miss the point. Because all those people who are limiting our freedom, they are also intellectuals. In fact, they are the managers of the intellectuals. Intellectual work in our institutions. How do we deal with those? So, but obviously we do need collaboration as samahani bwana, vichwa vyenyewe vinaanza kupata kutu. Hiyo unafahamu. So that we collaborate, but it can only come through discussion, engagement, meetings. And there's also that thing we call courage. Because you have to be courageous also. It's one of the things that we must encourage. Courage. The young people who are speaking today, and I'm very sorry to say, they were more brilliant than their expressions were because they're dealing with this monster called the English language, which they haven't mastered because they haven't been taught to master that language. So you see this young person, brilliant, grappling, trying to express themselves, and they can't. You know, because they don't know the grammar of English that they use, although the grammar of their thoughts is very correct and very good. This is another area we must struggle. And we don't do sufficiently because we are all comfortable, some of us, in this language. But let me not. The next thing is, what, questions from the floor? Do you allow that? Do you allow? Okay. The person in the end there. Hello. Please give them a microphone. Now, you know what? We have only 20 minutes for 1,000 people. So if you get 20 seconds, be helpful. Use it.
Asante. My name is Jasper Kido, and I have some comments, actually. I totally agree that technology can be used as a tool for development, prosperity, engagement, and so forth. But I also believe, as intellectuals, I think it's somehow missing amongst, during our discussion, but also amongst us. We rarely question who owns the technology. Basically, who is it that owns that particular technology? We do not discuss about the monopoly and the hegemony of the respective technology. So the ownership status, should it still remain as it is? Because we're fascinated when we hear that, who is this guy? Musk wants to bring Starlink, something like that, in Tanzania and so forth. We're like, yeah, bring it here and so forth. But who controls it, actually? Because we see the case of Palestine, a lot of a lot of people who have been pro-Palestine, their accounts have been suspended. Not in Twitter, in Instagram, in WhatsApp, and so forth. So basically, we as intellectuals also have to question on this position, the ownership status in this respective technology. Again, the hegemony of technology, we also need to question it. Because we tend to say that it is a facilitator. Okay. But Snowden and Assange use technology for democracy purposes. And we have seen, basically, the impact. Lastly, is about what is technology? What technology? And for whose purpose? Because most of the time, I think we as intellectuals are mistaking modernization, technology, the modernization concept of technology with westernization concept. When we talk about technology, what is technology? Does embody the mbolea ya asili, sindio? And the ureas and the likes. So is this the local technology, not technology, and only this which is actually introduced in the industries and so forth? Uchavushaji, the local pollination processes and so forth, our local seeds. Isn't that also net technology? And lastly, lastly, in terms of you say we use technology for socialization. The first day, there was somebody who said about Zoomification of intellectuals here. So there is the e-socialization, the electronic, but there is no actual socialization. We just remain outside in our Zooms, meetings, and so forth. So we as intellectuals also have to use that. Thank you so much. Okay, wakati nampa Mike, I want to caution. Somebody said artificial intelligence is neither artificial nor intelligent. So also question that.
Please give that to the lady just in front of you. Yeah, please. And no speeches, please. Just very small comments, okay?
Okay. I'm Hawa Ngunge, and I got the Confluence of Multiple Crises as presented by Kabaru. I got democratic backsliding, volatility of the economy, rapid population growth, social fragmentation, rapid technology, mental health, and environmental crisis. But to my view, these problems are not, they are presented as a general, and they are not presented in let's say, to present in female and male perspectives, like they are presented in general, while they affect the different genders differently. So I think that little effort is done to women empowerment, and these problems actually bring about gender inequality. They actually promote gender inequality. For instance, the democratic backsliding has led to wars. Was in Palestine, was in Ukraine. Women have suffered a lot than men, but we've seen there's little effort on bringing about gender balance when dealing with these problems, these crises, so-called.
One more question, and we'll go to, okay.
Thank you. My name is Budeba Mdiakado. I think mine is not a question, but I want to say the problem of technology is maybe individuals adopting their technology in their individualities very quickly than the institutions. Institutions are slowly adopting to technology as a general. But I can give you two things that has happened. When I was supervising my student, and I was asked to check whether they do plagiarism. And the plagiarism check, we use Turnitin. And you submit your student work to Turnitin, and you check whether there are similarities and how much similarities, and you term as plagiarism. Of course, I have caught a lot of my students with a high percentage of similarities. And one day, I was shocked when I put one of the assignment, the submission to Turnitin, a large part of the writing has no any indication of similarities. And I wondered why. But I discovered the language of that was different. And I found that there was the issue of in AI. It was used, the student used AI, some of the part, which the plagiarism, the Turnitin cannot detect. You see? That it was one part. So the institutions are insisting that you must check, but this new technology which are coming, sometimes they come with advanced technology and you cannot detect. But one of my students, maybe I can say, she's failing to graduate currently because she submitted a work. We worked on it, and it was to go to someone to edit the language. And when she sent that, maybe the person was given to edit used the artificial intelligence and they changed the chapter, the discussion chapter, into a different thing using technology. And when I read it, I found it is a different thing, and it is written in different. That is technology. So technology, I'm advising the university also, or the institution, to be proactive in adopting the technology so that they can help the student or the academic in advancing their knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But this keeps changing. So if you have one form today, tomorrow is different. You know, even ChatGPT has various ranges and various what you are able to pay for. So it's not just ChatGPT, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. I think the most important thing is still technology in the service of who? That's the fundamental question. And intellectuals must therefore be engaged to see, to find, to engage, and by the way also, to invent. Because there are also intellectuals in our own societies who are inventing technology and the most advanced level. But they must do it also in the cultural context, taking into consideration the realities of our lives. You know, I mean, just excuse me, because something pained me very much, something that you cannot think in terms of technology. A mother who is in labor goes to hospital, and she's told, unless you can pay this amount, we will not, until the woman dies there. You cannot find in this kind of technological thing. We have to go back and say, what is happening to our own societies? Ile Ubuntu imekwenda wapi? Yes, but we can also go further and say, Ubuntu wetu imekwenda wapi in the context of Gaza? Because this is thing we have to also put these things in perspective. Because this was a country that supported the liberation struggle, that broke relations with Israel for the same purposes, that gave PLO the first ambassadorial status everywhere. What happened? Courage, discussions, debate, etc. But we go to also interrogate ourselves. And this interrogation goes back to schools, to primary schools, the values being taught in secondary schools, the political parties, what are they saying? What are they doing? You know. So now we give each other a minute here to conclude, or what do you say? We still have questions. The last one. We have given Bwana Mkubwa try, otherwise he might, next time when he goes to power, he might put us in trouble. So we better give him a chance to speak.
Just want to comment on one thing. This debate of the use of technology for whose benefit, who owns the technology, I think it is a reactionary debate. The debate should be, why are we not investing in inventing the technology? Why should we be the subject of technology invented by others the role of universities, because many of these technologies we use now are produced by universities around the world, or by research institutions around the world, or by military institutions around the world. Our budget for research in this country is below 0.1% of GDP. And I think these are the things we should direct ourselves in. There are technologies we're inventing. Now the world is using mobile money. Mobile money was invented in Africa. The trademark is Kenya, but the kids who invented the M-Pesa are Tanzanians. And here in Tanzania, regulators did not want it. Regulators wanted to protect the banks. So the central bank did not allow these young kids to make a trial of the mobile money transfer here in the country. So because they are working with Vodacom, and Vodacom and Safaricom are owned by the one person, so they went to Kenya, and CBK allowed it. And then the trademark was registered in Kenya. And today, one of the biggest exports of Kenya is M-Pesa. The whole world is using M-Pesa. So I think we have to really direct our debate into investing in research and developing technologies.
It is a reaction. I don't like this reactionary aspect of those are really questions, because this last one also we put it in place.
Yeah, but I think Zito raises the question but doesn't answer it. And the way he answers it, M-Pesa has integrated it further in the capitalist system. That is where the real issue is. I'm surprised. We talked about technology, the good and the bad, potential, etc. But within what system this technology is produced? How is it reproduced? You know, and why are we so shy of naming the system? It's a capitalist system, okay? And it is based on the social relations of production and division of labor of capitalism. Chambe talks about structure of inequality. Structure of inequality is produced and reproduced by capitalism. Okay? And that is where we should start our debate on. Okay, what system we are in. I will just want to give one example, Walter, and then I'll shut up. Robotization. Robotization. There are two aspects of robotization. There is robotics, okay, where robots can do certain jobs which are drudgery jobs, okay, and therefore has the potential to relieve human beings of those drudgery jobs. But in capitalist system, what happens? Robots are employed to do those jobs, people become unemployed. Redundancies. But in a different system, what would happen? People will get more time of leisure, right, and rest. Because drudgery work is done by robots. But don't expect that in a capitalist system. The other aspect of robotization, which we should really be talking about, is robotization of the human being. Dehumanization. Okay? We talked about GMOs, genetic modified organism. But very soon I think we should be talking about DMB, digitized modification of human brain. Okay? And don't think it's too far. Don't think it's too far. Bill Gates is on that. Okay? It will come through ID system, digital ID system. Kenya has adopted it. You inject a chip in a human being as soon as the human being is born, and then you can control the human being. How to think, how to proceed. So these are important issues. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, this one wishes had a whole day to discuss this. Now you say you want the right of reply. What kind of reply? This is not parliament. Where we be if you wanna. Anyway, I'll give you half a minute time. Okay, you go ahead.
I just want to make a point. As Professor said, yes, it's a result of the capitalist system, but it is also very, very important that the same capitalists are breaking their own principles in order to have a control of big data and of technology. A very good example is the critical minerals. EU just a few weeks ago have banned importation of the critical minerals from China against the WTO rules, their own trade body. Here in Tanzania, Mzebgoya, in Kahama, an American state company. Have you ever heard an American state company? The US government formed a state company to invest in value addition for our nickel in Kahama in order to supply for their EV, electrical vehicles. And I think these are the things we must bring to their attention.
Which is why they are then, refusing China, because they already got a source from China.
And that's why they're now investing in Banguela Railways.
System that the corporate is talking about.
And this is why they're investing in Banguela Railways to connect Katanga and Copperbelt in Zambia to Malawi in order to give them an access to these critical minerals to the US. And we need to discuss this.
Okay, now, it's enough for you two people. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Okay, I get carried away sometimes because it's so exciting, so wonderful. So we maybe give them a minute, one minute, everybody here, please. Now we'll do it the reverse way. Tutaanza na Mshaya.
Thank you very much. I would argue, actually, this is why I wanted us to start with the question of culture. Because if you think about culture as people engaging with what is this norm that we're living in, what are we accepting? Can we critique it? Can we think about it? Then you understand why I'm saying you cannot talk about the technology. Prof, what you said about capitalism, what you said about who owns all these questions. That is why we must start discussing technology from discussing what is our ideal norm. So thank you very much. You made the points brilliantly.
Okay,
can I also just also acknowledge what she said about gender? I think that's really important, but also to think about how every bit of technology either increases access or decreases access. Because we haven't yet talked about people with disabilities. We haven't talked about, there's so many dimensions that I think we also need to put on the table. Thank you for that thought.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. To start with Howard's suggestion, thank you so much. In the interest of time, I could not unpack and disaggregate all the multiple crises that I was talking about because definitely they affect different groups of people differently and even different geographies in a different way. But you can see the pressure of time that we have here. And quickly, to respond to Professor Shivji's question that are we shying away from naming the system? Perhaps the question that I can throw is that sometimes for me I feel when we put these labels, sometimes it derails us and from the real discussion that we need to have. But rather for me, I suggest that we can sometimes suspend the use of those labels and instead focus on the effects that they create. If they are not bringing more freedom, if they are restricting more people from participation, the effect that people feel, I think for me, once we talk about those effects, the felt feelings of the people and the experiences of the people, to me it's more important rather than getting stuck with the labels, because sometimes it takes us away from talking about the effects and how to deal with them. That's my feeling. You may disagree, and it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're talking of intellectual social responsibility is about our relevance in this planet. So we need to strive as much as we could to be relevant given the competing interests.
Thank you. Just to quickly respond to one of Chido's questions. I think that was touching on my last point before I was cut when I was talking of the indigenous knowledge and giving importance to our own technology. That is what I was referring to. And the last point I was trying to make was giving importance to our own knowledge actually is in line with the the academic freedom as far as the research is concerned, because it has been the mainstream thought that whatever is scientific, whatever is scientifically as far as research is concerned has to be westernized. And I can give a quick example, which some of you might not like. During the COVID period, there was an attempt by Madagascar, I remember. And I don't want to delve into whether the liquid was really a cure or not. I just want to direct my thoughts onto the thoughts, the general perspective of even our own intellectuals, the way the attempt was being bastardized by the WHO, and we were also in line with the very same thoughts, not even thinking from the other angle that could be a sort of trying to try our own sovereignty as far as research is concerned, without saying that was a cure or not. But we all went on bastardizing it as if the WHO and the Western world has the monopoly in science and research and the related. So I think, was right. We need to give importance to... I thought...
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to respond to really elaborate more about this. My point about structures of inequality. So we have a global system that has been reproducing itself over 400-500 years, creating centers and peripheries, the so-called global north and the global south. So when you are overlaying technological advancement in that structures, definitely a capitalist system, those technologies are not simply going to remove the inequalities. So if there is gender inequality, if there is racial inequality, if there is class inequalities, when you superimpose cell phones, yes, they will help me to send money to my grandma in the village, but you are having Vodacom, a capitalist, or Tigo, a capitalist company, extracting profit, super profit, from me, from my grandma, and everybody else. So that's what I was trying to really argue. So definitely, Kido, you have Elon Musk monopolizing Twitter. We have black investors, African investors investing a lot of things, but they can't take over because you have a monopolistic system. The first Facebook was not in Facebook, but a version of Facebook was invented by black people in America. But they couldn't make it because of the liberal structure of the way the market is organized and so forth. So if you really need to use technologically more positively than we are using it, you still need to address the same structural inequalities that we've been addressing them in different ways.
I don't think I should add more to this section. I think we're dealing with a monster that's very old and that has tentacles wherever. They have to all be cut for an emergence of the new humanity. I'm sorry. Oh, no, sorry. I was simply saying that this monster is so huge with so many tentacles, and the only way to resolve is those tentacles have to be cut everywhere for a new humanity, a new humanism to arise and create a new world. All the issues that we did discuss about environment and so on. This state which cannot invest more than even 0.01%, what kind of state is that? All these issues, who owns that? But they are the amount of money they spend to acquire repressive technologies is much more than they would have used to build much more constructive and people technology. So the question again is still that's the fundamental one. So anyway, well, lazima tumalize some point. So thank you very much, everybody. And this is the kind of life that we should be creating: discuss, debate, and discover each other also, because this is important. We must discover one another, and we can only do that through discussion, debate, and a little bit of drink every now and then, because it's important. Au sio jamani? Asante.
There is a video clip that is doing rounds. It features James Schneider, who is a former Labour advisor in the UK. And this is what Kido was referring to when he was talking about artificial intelligence being neither artificial nor intelligent, because he put this question on ChatGPT, right? Yes. Do Palestinians have the right to be free? And the answer was, this is very complex issue. It's emotional. Some people agree. Some people, it's a huge debate. There's no consensus. And the same question, do Israelis, or does Israel have the right to be free? Israelis, just like any other people in the world, deserve to be free. The same. And I think this responds to same question on the same issue but different answers. And I think it goes back to the idea that because for the machines to work, you need to feed them data, right? Feed them information. And in this case, it has to be the right information. But that also is contested. What is the right information? I think in some parts of the world, the idea of Israel has the right to defend itself. That's the right information, right? But in other parts of the world, that's not the right information. So it's a contested area, but it goes back to underscore the importance of human agency. These are just machines. You feed them data, and they'll give you results. You give them wrong data, they'll give you wrong. Exactly. So now it's lunch break. So we're going. Sorry.
The next session.
I thought the next session. Okay, all right. Sorry. I think I'm hungry. Okay. So it's one about conclusion, right? Like the concluding session, right? And Kamata, I think there's Professor Noah also. Godwin. Sure. Please. So we start with Godwin.